Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another one of my interviews here. I am William Wallace, and with me today is Let's Go Brandon Wilkinson, but not Let's Go Brandon as you might think it is. It's actually his actual name. And as you know, the theme is I've been interviewing a lot of people that I met at CPAC. And with me today is Brandon Wilkinson, who's running for Congress in Missouri. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you reaching out.
You know, I got to tell you, your jacket, of course, caught my attention at CPAC, but also just the idea of it because your name is really Brandon.
Yeah, that was handed to me on a silver platter, and I'd have been stupid to not utilize it.
Well, obviously, I'm gonna state the obvious. My real name is William Wallace. So I would have been stupid not to use my real name, William Wallace, which stands for freedom. Well, it doesn't stand for freedom, but people know it as in the movie about freedom. So this is great. I've got the name William Wallace. You get the name Brandon. However, your name stands for something different than what Let's Go Brandon does, right?
It absolutely does.
So let's talk about that. I mean, it's funny because Brandon Wilkinson, your name for Congress or your actual name running for Congress, but you're using I want to say derogatory term, Let's Go Brandon. It's not derogatory in itself, but it infers that, what Brandon's doing for us or the name Brandon, i.e. Joe Biden. So let's talk about that play on words that you do.
Well, as simple as this is that, it represents the sentiment of I'd say at this point, more than half the nation. So, call it derogatory or not. I mean, I get it. It is in a sense, but at the same time, I feel like it's
you're flipping it.
Exactly. It is a derogatory term. We all know what it stands for, FJB. But it's about the sentiment and the mentality of the nation that realizing that, hey, this is a problem. And, it also is a representation of fake news. Absolutely. If you know where Let's Go Brandon.
Right. Exactly.
So, but I'm a regular working class American, just a regular guy, truck driver. I've blown up to having third largest political following in Facebook on the state of Missouri. I'm told top 100 to 150 in the nation. And the reason that I have reached this point in the mass following I have is because I'm brutally honest. I don't BS. I tell people exactly what I believe. You can ask me a leading question. If I disagree with you, I'll look you in the eyes and tell you otherwise. And I believe Let's Go Brandon. I'm pissed off. I don't like the direction our nation is going. Our administration is a joke. I call him President Houseplant because all he does is sit there. He doesn't do anything but further degrade our nation. So let's go, Brandon.
I love it. So let's go, Brandon, both figuratively and literally.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. How many of those jackets do you have, by the way?
Just this one right now, but I'm gonna get I'm gonna get another blazer done. So this is actually embroidered. This wasn't custom. The jacket itself wasn't custom made. I'm a regular guy, so I have one suit, one nice suit, and that is for funerals. And then I have a cheaper suit. And basically, my grandfather's funeral, I said he always said he wanted to see me in a nice suit, so I went and got a nice suit. And I wanted to get this embroidered on my on a jacket for CPAC and events. And I'm like, that was an expensive suit. And I mean expensive, in
right.
terms for a regular person, so I'm like, I don't want to ruin that, though it's not ruining it because, this is gorgeous.
Exactly. I love it.
So I went up to Savers and I tried on every jacket they had. I actually found 3 that were exactly the right size for me, right length, right arm length, everything else. The only differences was the size of the sleeves, which I'm getting tailored down. But I took this over. I have a supporter who owns American Embroidery. She was a supporter in 2020 and now she donated both times, her husband also. So I reached out and I said, hey, you know what? I got to get this embroidered. I got to go to someone who supports me. So I went to her and I said, can you do this? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And then refused to let me pay. So I got this and I'm going to get, I have a blue, I bought this one, a blue one and a gray one. So I'm going to get all of them done this way. And these are going to be my kind of event things. So,
and what is her name of her business? What's the name of her business again?
American Embroidery out of, I believe it's technically in Warrenton, Missouri.
We know it's in Missouri. So you're running for Congress In Missouri, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
What district?
Missouri's 3rd congressional district.
Okay. You know, I also interviewed Mark McCloskey out there. He's doing some interesting things.
Mark's a friend of mine. Actually, I have a big event on Sunday, and myself and Wesley Smith. I want to introduce him, so you can interview him later. He's District 2, and we met, and basically, I gave him a couple pointers. You know, I've been in politics for a long time, so though this is only my 2nd campaign, and I've been into politics for a long time. So I gave him a couple tips and where I saw a couple things wrong. And before you know it, me and him were best friends. Like we talk every day. We hang out all the time. And now we cross campaign and work together. So we're having this event on Sunday. All of my rallies are going to be branded as Fight Back America and then whatever the issue is. So me and Wesley decided, let's do this. We were going to do a big event up in St. Charles because half St. Charles is his district and half's mine. St. Charles is a big county. And we decided, you know, these lower elections really matter. They really impact our lives far more in a lot of ways, especially in the future. So we started looking at the school board candidates and decided let's find someone we like. We found this amazing guy, so we moved the rally and did it in this other area right by where our district's border. So we're having a Fight Back America, Take Back Our Schools rally, supporting amazing school board candidates. And we got the most award-winning media person in the Midwest, a friend of mine, Jamie Allman. He's going to be coming out as a guest speaker. Stacy on the right, Stacy Washington's coming out as a guest speaker. And then we reached out to a couple candidates that we like. I like Mark McCloskey. I've liked him for a long time, and reached out to him. And so he's going to come be a guest speaker at our event on Sunday.
Love it.
Along with a couple other people. And it's looking to be a really big event.
And when is this going to be?
This is going to be Sunday. For anyone watching, because I actually shared this across my page, so we got my viewership right now too. It's going to be Sunday in Arnold Park in Jefferson County, Missouri, from 2
This
to
coming
5.
Sunday.
Yes, this Sunday.
Okay. Well, when I had the time, I'd get up there and visit with you guys up there. So how have you been involved in politics before now? You said this is your 2nd run. You've been involved in politics. How have you been involved in politics?
Well, this is my 2nd run. In 2020, we launched, and I said when I launched, we're going to lose this race. This is about building a foundation of support so we can win 2022, because I don't have name recognition.
But that's the other race, not this race.
Yeah, that was the prior race. This race, we started out and said, hey, actually, we have a massive following. We have the levels of support. We're on the right trajectory. And then we've blown up astronomically. I went, let's just use Facebook alone, because that's the best metric to tell of the social media, your support levels, right? I had 10,800 followers on my page when we launched this campaign on October 25th. On November 3rd, I started getting active on Facebook again. And we were hoping that the activity would pick up how it was at the end of the 2020 primary. And people were so devoted and loyal and just big supporters. They instantly got back active, and it continued our trajectory. And we blew up. I have 163,000 followers. That is more than about...
On your campaign page or your personal page?
On my campaign page.
Okay.
That is more than about 96 to 98% of sitting congressmen, and more than around 90% of senators, and more than about 99.8% of candidates.
Right, I love it.
Including pundits. I mean, I have the 3rd largest political following in the state of Missouri, only behind Eric Greitens and Josh Lawyer. And that's not just candidates and politicians. That's candidates, politicians, pundits, media people. That's huge. So, great track. This time we definitely can't win. Now, going back to 2010, that's when I started getting involved in politics. So I was watching politics. I was really into politics. I wished I could have gone back in time. I used to say, I wish I could go back and redirect my education. Worked a little harder in school, went to college for poli-sci and some of these other things that people say are what you need to have and to be qualified, which is a falsehood. That we've been indoctrinated to believe that. And I diffuse that real instantly and make people realize they're wrong really quick, or open their eyes to the truth about it. And it takes about 30 seconds to do that. But anyways, so I'm sitting there with my best friend, Ryan, God bless his soul. We're sitting there, we're drinking a beer and we're watching politics. He used to hate it, but we were best friends, so he tolerated it. And he's like sitting here and Harry Reid comes on TV and he's talking about this bill, and it's been a passion of mine to read legislation. Right. So he's just lying out both sides of his mouth with it. And it just pissed me off. And I just hit my wits end. I said, I've been complaining for years. And I turned to Ryan and I said, Ryan, I'm going to run for Congress. And he looks at me and laughs. And I'm like, for real? And he's like, is it the beer speaking? And I was like, well, no, like I'm serious. I'm gonna run for Congress. He's like next election? And I'm like, oh gosh, no, I got a lot to learn. Because too many people jump in feet first without
Right.
knowing anything, without knowing the regulation, even just the laws with campaigning. So I wanted, I wanted to when I did get elected, to be able to step in and be a strong and effective congressman. So I spent the next
And
roughly 9
effective, right?
huh?
And effective, you said. A
I said to
strong
be
and effective.
strong and effective.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent the next 9.5 years studying a variety of things. Law is something I love. I've read a ridiculous amount of court cases, Supreme Court cases, precedents, and dissent. If you're gonna be a lawmaker, you got to understand how to read, write, interpret, and apply a law, right? So, and then other aspects of civics and government and so on, understanding the processes that take place. So, then I was ready. And in 2015, when the stuff happened to my brother I told you about, that's when it went from being one day to setting a goal. But I worked in people's campaigns, people I believed in, people I liked, prior to myself running. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a taste of some things I didn't know with campaigning. And then 2020, I did my thing.
What I like about this is there's an acknowledgement, if you will. I stammered on that a little bit, but there's also a statement to say. And what I mean by that is you didn't just say, hey, look, I'm a regular guy, I'm jumping in the race. You said, I'm a regular guy, but I got some things to learn. So you actually took some time, and I don't know what the time frame was, but it sounds like you took some time to actually learn what you felt you needed to learn to make you a better candidate. Besides the school of hard knocks.
Yes, better candidate and more effective representative when I get in, because it's not a question of if, it's when.
So you ran the first time for Congress, right?
Yes.
Was that 2 years ago or 4 years ago?
That was 2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years ago. And after that is when you went back to college and said, look, I want to learn some things before I run again, kind of cut my teeth, if you will, correct?
No, I didn't go to college. I self-taught. A lot of people think that you need to go get these degrees and so on, but the fact of the matter is this: roughly about 20% of the population is capable of teaching themselves pretty much anything. About 60% of the population is capable of teaching themselves most things, and it only leaves about 20% that is really dependent on being taught. So most people are capable of teaching themselves anything they want. So I bought a variety of different college books having to do with the issues and the things I wanted to learn, and I read them myself. Did a lot of researching online, studying, and everything I know is self-taught as far as government goes, government law. And I tell you what, I can actually sit there, and I've studied law very much in depth. I can take pretty much not pretty much, every practice bar exam I've come across online. I take it and pass every single time, and I hold myself to the actual standard of what a bar would be, the time limits and everything else. And granted, you can't take the essay part of the bar online because it's an essay. You can't practice that.
Right.
But I've truly devoted myself to learning these things because I want to, when I get elected, I want to be able to go in there and be one of the strongest freshman congressmen going in, so I can give my constituents good representation.
Now, what I like about this is you for yourself, you're acknowledging what you feel are maybe or were your weaknesses, where you felt you need to learn some things. So you took it upon yourself to self-teach yourself some things that you felt would help you if and when rather you won Congress, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So let's talk about your everyday life. You actually are a truck driver, and truck drivers in America right now are heroes, by the way. I know you know that, but what type of truck driving do you do?
So I've been a truck driver now for 14 years, and I work for an LTL, that's less than load. So I put my time in over the road, and then because you pretty much have to if you want to get on with a good company and be home. So I put my time in over the road, and then I came on with the company I'm with now, and I've been there for July will be 12 years. So what I do is what's called scheduled line haul or scheduled regional. So I leave out of the St. Louis area, and I head out to Indiana to a specific location. I'm not going to say because I don't want anything to give.
Right. No worries. Right.
Yeah, or where it is. I get a
Yeah,
lot of
right.
heat, man. I really get a lot of threats. People don't like that I'm bold. So anyways, I go out there and I pull double. So the trucks going down the road, like you see like UPS and FedEx and Old Dominion where they're pulling 2 trailers, that's what I do. So I'm driving a really big semi. So I go out there, I'll drop my 2 trailers, and then I grab 2 more trailers and bring them back, and I'm home every day.
What's interesting about this is, and a lot of Americans right now are holding the truckers as heroes because, you know, one of what they've stood up for in Canada, and they've kind of taken that same sentiment. You know, the American truckers have kind of taken that same sentiment. But what I'd also like to point out is that let's put that aside for a second. That you actually understand what it takes to keep America moving.
Absolutely. Trucking is the trucking and logistics is the cardiovascular system in the United States. And
Never heard
in
it put that.
reality,
That's a good point.
and in reality of every nation, if trucks shut their keys off for 1 week, our nation would collapse. And that's not an exaggeration. Our nation would go into chaos. That is a legitimate thing. Your average store has enough food on the shelves to last about 2 days. Okay. So let's say trucks, stop running, right? Well, then you get the panic buying. So it doesn't last 2 days, it lasts 2 hours. And now there's no new food coming in. Well, your average urban family has roughly about 2 days worth of food in their home. Your average rural family has about 4 days worth of food in their home. So going by your averages, within 4 days, most of society in the United States is out of food, and there's no food to buy. What does that create? Chaos. Because at the end of the day, if I'm a parent, and if it comes down to it at the end of the day where my family's going to starve, I'm going to do what I have to do to feed them and take care of them. And that will make good men bad men. So
you're actually in the center of not only the supply chain problems that we're experiencing here in America, but you're actually in the center of, well, not in the center of, but you're actually an everyday working guy. You're like that cross section of America of somebody that knows what it's like to have to work hard to feed your family. It's something you got to show up for work every day, or you're not going to eat. I know that's kind of a conservative type of value, but you're also one of those guys that, like I said, you're in the mix. You're aware, and you're self-taught. So you've actually said, "Hey, look, what I don't know from experience, I'm going to learn on an education standpoint, and I'm going to bring all of this to Congress."
Yes, and let me correct one thing I just said, because as a congressional candidate, anything you say that's incorrect, you get slaughtered for. I said it was 2 days for a urban family, 2 days worth of food, and 4 for a rural family. I'm sorry, it was 2 days for urban and 6 days for rural, which is a average of 4 days. So something so small shouldn't matter.
I got you.
You know how people are.
No, look, I'm not gonna hold you responsible for that, because look, even I, you sometimes when you're on the show, as long as you get the gist of it correct. I mean, you've got the majority of it correct. And if you're a day off, 2 days off, I certainly understand. But let's talk about this though. What do you feel qualifies you to run for Congress, in Missouri or anywhere for that matter?
So there's the basic standard, and this is where I open people's eyes generally. People come out to my events, and usually it's all supporters, but I always have someone show up at events.
Absolutely.
And they say, "Well, you're just a truck driver. You're not qualified. What makes you think you're qualified?" And so on. Well, first, right off the bat, the documents that are behind me say I'm qualified. I'm 25 years old, and I'm a citizen, and I live in the state of Missouri, so I'm qualified. All right. Now, that's not what people refer to when they ask, "Are you qualified?" Because that is a true qualification right there. What the Constitution says,
right,
you need to do. But what really makes you qualified? Well, if you ask most people, all right, roughly about 90% of people are going to give you one of 3 answers, and about 8% are going to give you one other answer. So what those are what people consider to be the metric of qualification. Now, what are those things? And this is what I tell people when they confront me, like, they say, "Well, it depends on what's qualified." Right. And then I present it back and say, all right, most people, 90% would say this, or 98 would say one of these 4 things. Then, would you agree? And I say what they are, which is someone with lower level experience in politics, business owner, or lawyer/law degree. The 4th thing is a poli-sci degree. Okay. Would you agree with that? 98% of people will, because only 2% come up with other answers than that. So 98% of people will agree. Yes, that is the qualification. Okay. You just described 99% of Congress. Do you think they're doing a good job? Well, 91% of people, well, I guess in 2020 it was 91%. I guess now it's 87%, would say, no, they're not, because Congress has a horrible approval rating.
Right.
So statistically, by percentages, 87% with a 13% approval rating, 87% are going to say, no, they're not. Okay, so, well, those standards that you say are what makes someone qualified, that represents Congress. So you say Congress is doing a bad job, and that's what we've had for the last 50 years. So maybe we've been indoctrinated into believing that those four things are what someone needs to have, is one of those four. Maybe what we really need is people who understand the impact of bad policy, regular working class Americans, regular people. And when I make this pitch, and this is actually the first time I made this pitch since 2020, so I'm a little rusty on it. This normally flows a little better. I see where someone just clicks that, oh, wait a minute, and then they're willing to listen, and that's where my many years of preparation come into play, because I know pretty much every issue,
Right.
and I have real solutions for a variety of them. So that makes them willing to listen. Then they give me the chance. And I've never once had one not leave without telling me, someone who came to be opposition and say you're not qualified. I've never once had one of them leave one of my rallies saying anything other than, you have my support.
So tell me though, let's talk about and I guess extrapolate, a little bit more there. You're self-taught, self-studied, working class man. You've spent a lot of time getting prepared for this. So that's the point I want to make. You haven't just said, look, I'm jumping in because I'm a regular working guy. I think I'm prepared for it. You've actually prepared for it. You've actually studied for it, almost like it's an examination. Other than just trying to take your unique skill set as being a regular working class person, you said, no, I know this is coming down the road, that I want to do this, so I'm willing to study to back up my beliefs, my acumen, if you will, but to back up what I would think is necessary to have the qualifications to run. Is that correct?
Yeah, but not only what I felt was necessary, I also studied the things that I didn't feel that was necessary, because it's what people think is necessary. Because I need to be able to sit down at a table.
Great. I'm going to stop you for a second. That's a great point. So that's kind of what I was thinking in the back of my mind. I said, I'm thinking in the back of my head, well, you really don't need all that. I mean, you've got a unique skill set in itself to run for Congress. You really don't need that. But perception for many people is reality. And so you wanted to meet that perception. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, yes, but no, not just perception. You having the ability, I'll use this as an example, right? The ability to sit here and talk with you. No, if you bring up an issue or something that is more traditional, am I going to be able to add something to it? Because that is perception and optics, but it's also not. So I wanted to try to do everything to be the whole package, to know the issues, prepare myself for everything I believed I'd need. But then the thing is, we all think we know what we need, and we're always missing something. So I said, let's do that, and then do what these people, the people who spend the time around it, let's also learn that. Then no matter what, I'm going to be, at worst case, I'm over prepared, which still equals effective.
Right. Hey, look.
So, and I also, aside from all these things, I also led by example. Politicians and candidates always want to come to us and ask us for our money. And they don't put their own in. If you look, like most of the candidates, especially the rich ones out there, very few put their own money in. I'm a regular working class American, middle class American. All right. I put my money where my mouth is. In 2020, I refused to accept a single dime until I spent the money I saved for my own campaign, which for your average person would say it was a lot of money. I then further went and pulled $10,000 out of my 401k and put that in the campaign. Then I sold my motorcycle. Since I was 18 years old and got my first motorcycle, I was like, I think I was 19 years old when I got my first motorcycle. However I was, it was right in that range. I said I will always have a motorcycle for the rest of my life. I had a beautiful bike. All right. I treated it great. It was gorgeous. It was my baby. And I went and I said, this is how devoted I am. I sold my motorcycle. My wife did not want me to sell my motorcycle. I sold my motorcycle. And then I put that money in the campaign too. And in this cycle, and I didn't accept any money from it until I spent what I had already saved And then I, at that point, started accepting money, but I wasn't really seeking it until really about the last month of my campaign.
Right.
This same thing. I'm putting money in every week. If you go, I've put about $20,000 of my own money in my campaign, and I'm not. I'm a regular guy. I live in a 1,200 square foot house. I mean, that's not exactly living it up. You know, I have a wife. I have a son. You know, so I tried to lead by example and show that I'm really in this. I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone. I'm not trying to have everyone else fund me and not be willing to put something on the line myself, you know, and I think that that's something, and I've been told that that's something that really resonated a lot with people.
Right. Well, let's talk about some issues, because I know that, you know, in order to get a vote from the people, you got to talk about some issues, and you've got a ton of them on your site, and so I want to point that out, which I think is really, really interesting. But let's talk about the economy first off. You know, you've got one on here about economy, and I'm going off your site, and let's talk about that.
Okay,
What are some of the things
so
that you'll do as a congressman to help improve our economy?
well, I think right off the bat we need to be more pro entrepreneur. If people want to start businesses and try to, you know, take the risk to live the American dream, we should remove some of the barriers of entry. You know, so something I'd like to do right off the bat is, because I spoke to more than a few people that really wanted to start their own businesses, but you know they don't really have the money, or they've been saving up, but the amount of time it takes to get there is so hard. But you know, if I could just withdraw from my 401k or my savings, you know, I would do it. But then I'm looking at these penalties, and it just takes so much extra out of it. So I would love to actually pass legislation to remove the 10% penalty for early retirement and suspend the tax burden. So if I withdraw, let's say for up to $100,000 withdrawn to start a business, if I wanted to withdraw $100,000 from my 401k, I could withdraw $100,000. The 10% penalty for withdrawing early would be gone completely. Then the tax burden for that would go as if federal income tax is what it'd be in state income tax. Set a standard for, if you can meet these levels of doing these specific things, then your tax burden's gone. And that would give a lot of people the ability, who want to start businesses, the ability to do it. Because and I say up to $100,000, but I've spoke to many people who start their businesses with anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. You'd be surprised at how many people start their businesses with that small amount of money. But around 15,000 is about the average that of someone in my area in the 3rd District of Missouri spend. So that is something that a lot of people can very easily take from their 401ks. And but let's incentivize. Let's remove a variety of these hoops that you have to jump through, like to start a business, the amount of paperwork and regulations and so on. Let's make it easier for people to ignite our economy, to start businesses, to try to live the American dream. Let's make it easier. Let's stop making it harder, because we continue to pass these regulations and all these extra hoops, and every one of those costs money. They cost stress. They make it more scary for someone to look at and say, I want to start a business. So there's one right there. Okay. We just need to remove the barriers for entry into creating businesses, small business. We need to deregulate a lot of industries, and I'll use trucking as an example, just in the time I've been in trucking, because I was actually an owner op and lease op when I started my career. And so I firsthand felt the financial burdens caused by excessive regulations. So, if we were to deregulate trucking as an example, we would lower there's a lot of redundant regulations in trucking, and every single one of them add expense. Well, if you deregulate it, we can deregulate a lot of things in trucking and never sacrifice the safety aspect. That would dramatically lower the cost of transportation. Well,
that's right.
Which would also then in turn lower the cost of everything that goes through trucks. Well, what goes through trucks? Everything. So you would further lower the cost of all merchandise and products and goods. So there's another thing. And I know, we don't want to sit here and spend an hour on every issue, but I can go on pretty much any issue on my page. I don't like to throw around saying I'm an expert, but
Right.
pretty much everything on my page I can talk for a very long time about because I have
Well,
plans for.
whether it's something you're an expert about, have a lot of information about, or just have an opinion about, I think it's important to the people to get to know you who say, well, even if it's just an opinion, they can just say, well, I agree or disagree. But sometimes it depends on how good your opinion sounds too, which is important. And I got to smile on that one so you understand that you are understanding not only the information, but how to communicate it to people so they get it, that you understand what needs to be done, or a step in the right direction, if you will, to make things happen surrounding that topic. What about the Second Amendment?
Oh, I almost brought an AR-15 down here just in case the Second Amendment came up, so I could pick it up and be like, "I love my Second Amendment."
Yeah, right.
I'm a true 2A candidate. I don't just say it. If you go back to my videos from 2020, my ads, politicians like to hold firearms in their ads and say, I'm pro Second Amendment. And if you send me to DC, I'll protect your right. And then they go to DC and they vote in favor of legislation that infringes upon our Second Amendment rights. So what I did was I did videos. I went out to a range I like, and because I'm an avid firearms enthusiast. So I went out to a range and I gave my spiel about the Second Amendment and the importance of it. And then I picked up a gun, an AR-15 or whatever. And I talked about, a little more. And then I said, unlike politicians who look at this as a prop, to me, this is not. This is a tool. It's the Second Amendment. And then I turn around and show skill that you can't fake. I'm not saying I'm the best shooter in the world, but anyone who knows guns at all and they watch my videos will say, okay, yeah, that's a guy who actively practices and
who actually knows how to do it. So what has Congress done lately to infringe on our Second Amendment rights?
Lately. Okay. All right. So in the omnibus that just passed, actually had two pieces of gun control buried in it. So let me think for a second to recall exactly what they were, because I've been reading so much stuff lately. So one would actually give the ATF the ability to deputize or federalize local law enforcement to enforce ATF or BATFE regulations and so on. So basically making the federal government's branch of law enforcement to enforce firearms and so on stronger, basically expand them to the ability to be the size of basically all the law enforcement in the nation, essentially. The other one was what had to do with the NIC system. So when you do a background check, form 4473, if I recall correctly, don't hold me to that, people. It might be 4471. I think it's 4473. When you do your background check, right, it runs through NICS. So anytime you buy a gun, you have to fill out your background check. And then it goes through and either you get approved or rejected. Well, actually about 9 out of 10 rejections are wrong. Well, when you get rejected, then they investigate and, like people get arrested for this, because it's, you were not eligible to buy a firearm and you were trying to buy a firearm. Like people literally get arrested for this. So it actually strengthened that and created more issues in there to make it even less effective with accurately reporting, which will cause a lot more people legal problems when they've done nothing wrong. And then they have to fight and pay money to defend themselves when they've done nothing wrong. And then it comes back and it says, oh, whoops, our bad. Have a nice day. But
sorry. Yeah.
But you've incurred financial burden that you don't get back. So that was the second part. And there was actually a little bit more in there, but that was the two bigger pieces.
You've got military on your website. I know we talked off camera a little bit before we got started about how you support the military. What do you have on that?
Well, with the military, I'm a true advocate and activist for our military. My brother is an actual war hero, Bronze Star for Valor, Purple Heart, 21 documented combat injuries, 3 years combat deployments. I'm endorsed by General Flynn. I'm one of 3 people in the state of Missouri endorsed by Flynn. Eric Wright and Sam Alexander and myself are the only 3 people endorsed by Flynn in Missouri. And in his endorsement for me, it was actually said really a lot of good things, but said that I am a champion for our military veterans and law enforcement. And I really am, and I will be in Congress. So this is a really important issue to me. It's a top one because when I saw what happened to my brother when he was forced into medical retirement, I'll give a quick rundown. It won't be as long as like when me and you talk. So basically, my brother was forced into medical retirement, and he should have been receiving about $3,800 a month. Medical retirement for his combat injuries. Let's clarify that. He should have been receiving about $3,800 a month. He was receiving $1,400 a month. It called everyone we could to get help to get it corrected, and they kept saying next month, next month, next month. It took 14 months for one of the two things, his retirement to get corrected, another 2 months for his disability to get corrected. At that point, my brother lost everything he owned, and then he finally got the back checks, but it wasn't enough to cover, half of what he lost. That opened my eyes from just being someone who said I support the military to actively trying to help our veterans. And I found out that through reaching out to organizations and talking to veterans and going to veteran meetings, whether at VFWs or whatever, found that this actually is far more common than people realize. Like, it really is. It's actually incredibly common. So I try to help soldiers as I see their problems, because at that point in my life, I've been preparing for a congressional run for 5 years. So I knew who to talk to for most issues, who to send them
You've
to.
been planning this for a while, haven't you?
I'm sorry?
You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?
I have.
You really are passionate about our country.
Absolutely. So, greatest nation in the world, and I want my son to receive a nation that is better than the one that we inherited. I want my son and my nephews and nieces. I'm from a very big family, so I got a lot of nephews and nieces. I want my son and my nephews and nieces to experience more freedom than what we had growing up, not less. And at the rate we're going, if people don't get active and start fighting, then we're going to have our children and grandchildren are going to have no freedom.
I know. I'm worried about that too. You have healthcare on your website. What are your solutions for healthcare? The healthcare problems in this country.
This is one of the most complicated issues. So I can go in depth on a lot of these, but the healthcare one it's one of the most complicated. And
let's make it simple.
So simplifying, and I spent a lot of time researching where the biggest issues are: costs, burdens, increased costs. So first, we need to get rid of the lines. A lot of people don't know this, but you can only buy insurance from an insurer in your own state, right? So you're limiting the supply, but the demand continues to grow because population growth, right? So what happens when the supply is limited and the demand is increased? Cost goes up. So if we erase the lines, let's open up the supply across the nation. So I can buy from an insurer in California or in Texas or in Florida. What's going to happen? Now we have a lot more people trying to sell the same product. So they're going to cut their profit levels a little more, as much as they can to get our business, right? Right. Not, that would have a huge effect. All right. So that's a big one right there. That actually would have a massive impact. Okay. Second, let's see. Price transparency. This is a big one. And I know that Trump did some things about this, but my idea for price transparency is much more transparent than what Trump pushed in and got through. So if you need to get an MRI, you should be able to go on their website and see it. You should be able to call them and them tell you, rather than we'll tell you once we perform it and you get a bill a month later. Because if I shop around and I call over at Barnes and I call Mercy and I call SSM, and Barnes is $4,000 and Mercy is $7,000 and SSM is $8,000, because your average MRI is about $8,000. Well, then I'm going to go to Barnes, right? And it gives me the ability to shop around. I believe that there needs to be some malpractice reform, specifically, with tort law, because malpractice insurance is one of the greatest expenses that private practices face. I have two friends. I have a friend that's a doctor and a friend that's a dental surgeon, and their biggest expense is malpractice insurance. It's ridiculous. My friend who's a dentist, his malpractice insurance as a single dentist is $80,000 a year. That is crazy. We're talking $7,000 a month for insurance.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We need to. I love the idea of saying below a certain threshold of income, which I haven't exactly stated where that should be. I've done a lot of research. I'm thinking, somewhere around 150,000 as a household. Anything below that, if that's your household income, then all medical expenses should be tax deductible.
So let's talk. Well, actually, it's not tax deductible. Medical expenses are not a bad idea, but let's talk about when you talk about in the beginning of this question. What are some things that you would do to increase competition for health insurance companies, not only in our country but our states?
Okay, so if you erase the lines, allow all of them to sell from around the country, it's going to increase the competition in the states, right? Now, that's not going to do much for the individual hospitals themselves for how they're billing, but that's a misconception that people always say. It actually does, because it's this sleight of hand. Insurance charges more, and the hospitals will bill more, and everyone's making money on it. That's why if you look over the last roughly 12 years, the medical field, every aspect of has had record numbers profit year over year over year.
That's not because of COVID?
Oh no, yeah, no. So okay, so here's another thing though. A lot of people don't listen. I can't think of the proper name of it right now, but I can perfectly describe it. Every state has a gosh, can't recall what it's called. All right, you have a limited number of doctors, nurses, OTAs, PTs, and so on, all the areas of the medical field. There's a limited number that can practice in states. I don't just want to erase the lines for insurance. I want to erase it for doctors and nurses. I want to remove the quota, because what that does is it creates a false supply. And people, they claim that the reason for this is to, well, if we allow anyone who wants and they do it, we don't limit it, then what's going to happen is doctors there will be so much competition, they'll have to jack their prices up because they have less business. They'll have to jack their prices up. So this is to protect against that. That is BS, because if there's too many doctors, less people will become doctors. All right. And this has been proven study.
Well, supply and demand tells me that if there's a lot of doctors, that the prices go down.
Yeah. Yes. Well, but they like to say, well, if there's too many doctors, then the prices will go up, because if I have an average of, let's say, 20 patients a week in my practice, and then more doctors come along, now I only get 10 a week, I have to charge more money to make the same. And that's a false argument, because if you look at any industry across the board, this isn't just medical, as the labor market starts to get saturated, less people enter that market. So you don't ever really see that decrease. And I just can't believe I can't remember what it's called.
All right. It's come back up in a few minutes.
So, but that right there would actually also have a big effect. So if you put all these together, you would see a massive price difference in insurance and medical costs and all around expense, and it'd leave a lot more money in our pockets, which would also stimulate the economy. So let's jump back to economy. There you go.
Right.
More money in your pocket,
So what about taxes? I see you have taxes on your site. I'm going off of your site because obviously you got things to say about it, and I want to bring it up.
Okay, so I have one that people love. So I want to fight to end the taxation, the federal taxation of overtime, because I look at it and I say, what will impact the majority the best, the most, right? Well, regular and lower and middle class Americans, so regular work class Americans, they're the people that work overtime, right? So why do we work overtime? We work overtime for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's because we're behind and we're trying to get caught up. Sometimes it's because we want to get a little ahead. We want to get a little cushion in the bank. Maybe my car's crappy and I'm tired of always having to fix it, so I want to buy something new. Maybe I just want to take my family on a well-deserved vacation. But when I work overtime, not me, I actually don't get paid hours. So this policy wouldn't actually help me, but it would help most people. When I work overtime, not only am I continuing to pay taxes, but I'm actually paying a higher rate of taxes because my income is higher. Okay. So, so it's a negative. Like I think back when I used to work 64 hours a week to try to get ahead when I was struggling, 18 years ago, 16 years ago, 17 years ago, I worked 64 hours a week, and every hour more I worked, I got less of my money for it. And the thing is, at 40 hours, you put in full time, you've already paid the government their fair share. So why can't you keep the rest? You're sacrificing your time with your friends, your family, and so on. Why don't we do something for regular everyday people, for the 99%, not the 1%? So, and that's not an attack on the 1%, but it would be a benefit for the 99%. Or about the 97%.
So in other words, when it comes to taxes, you're going to do things in favor of basically the working class people, the people that where, an extra couple $100 in savings on taxes makes more of a difference than the wealthy people who, maybe they pay $200 because based on depending on who you talk to, some people say that the rich pay less in taxes, but we're not going to go there right now. You're saying that when it comes to taxes, you're going to keep the working class people in mind on when you have to have your opinion on adjusting the rates.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, people have attacked me and said, well, you're supposed to represent. Well, that's the thing is, I am. As a representative, you can't make everyone happy. You're supposed to represent the majority, as long as it doesn't violate these documents behind me. As long as it doesn't violate the Constitution.
I like the Constitution behind you.
Yeah, I have the three of the greatest political documents ever written. I have the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. And actually, one of them is sitting right there because I'm rearranging my office. So you're supposed to represent the majority. So as long as what the majority of my constituents want doesn't violate the Constitution, that's what I will support. Okay. And the thing is, this would affect the majority, and the majority would want it. So everyone who I've ever told this to wants it. And there's other areas of taxation. I bring that one up because that's a popular one that people love. And I've never seen anyone ever propose that. And I've been in politics for a long time. So this is a Brandon Wilkinson original.
I love that. The original being is, again?
Let's go, Brandon.
Well, no. What's the original again?
The taxation of overtime.
Gotcha. That is pretty original. So no taxation, no overtime, because you want to encourage more Americans, if they have a chance to get ahead, they can do it without having to pay the extra taxes on what, I mean, like you said, most Americans who are working overtime, not say most, but many Americans who are working overtime are doing it because they're just trying to get ahead. And why punish them for trying to get ahead when you can save them money on taxes or eliminate taxes on overtime in such a way that they can use that money to get ahead or put things back in to benefit their families? Is that correct?
Yes. And then here's another one. And I've gotten a few debates with people. So they were state congressmen, not federal, debates with them over the constitutionality of this. And I've won the debate every time. Is I actually want to, now let me caveat one thing. We can only stop the federal government from, as a U.S. Rep, I would only be able to stop the federal government. That's a policy, because you can't stop the states because of the 9th and 10th Amendments, right?
Right.
That's a state right of what they're going to charge in tax, but that's 4% versus 20.
Yeah.
Now that actually comes into play here, and that's why I caveated back to that. Is I want to actually create a federal regulation to prevent states from charging personal property and real estate tax on your owner-occupied home. So no more personal property tax. Okay, a lot of states already have got rid of that, and no real estate tax on your owner-occupied home. And this is where I've gotten debates where that's not constitutional. You can't do that. It's a state's right. Well, normally you're right, but the federal government does have a right to step in and tell the state they can't do things if it violates the Constitution. And property tax and real estate tax, they absolutely violate the Constitution. They violate your Fourth Amendment right, that your right of property. And people say, well, no, it doesn't. Well, yes, it does. Because if I don't pay it, what happens? My property gets taken. I can be arrested. Okay. So it absolutely does violate your constitutional rights. And that's where I make the argument, on that one. And that's another big one that would help everyone who's not rich. Not that I'm opposed to helping rich people. I'm just looking and saying the majority, these are
what's interesting here, Brandon. What's interesting, Brandon, is that you've got some unique ideas, whether they're going to be, whether they'll work or not, or whether they'll stand up in court or not, because that's the real answer, is whether they'll stand up in court or not. The idea that you're bringing them up for discussion, because let's say they're not viable ideas, but the fact that you're bringing them up for discussion, they might be able to help create different ideas or different laws, if you will, that can help people in these areas. And that's the part that I respect. So, I think it's a great idea that you're bringing it up for the purpose, because at the very least, it's for the purpose of discussion. What about?
Yeah, we need to think outside the box. We can't keep having politicians and try the same thing. Saying, let's try some new stuff, right? Let's come with some new ideas.
Right.
Maybe that one would get shot down in court. I think it would actually hold up. And I've talked to a few constitutional lawyers about this one. I think that one would probably hold up.
Right.
Right. Maybe not. Hey, it's new. It's getting our minds outside of the box, thinking of new ways to help people.
So I'm going down through your list here. You got a lot left on your list, but you're talking about there's something else on your list that's near and dear to my heart, which is election integrity. What is your idea for election integrity?
This is one thing I hate about Facebook. I can't say everything I want to say, or I'll get banned.
Exactly.
Facts are there. So let's start with what we can do. I want to get into the specifics of the things that can get us both banned, but I want to talk about it because this is such an important issue. First, you have to have election integrity. You have to have belief in election integrity. You can have a perfect election with no fraud, nothing happened wrong, nothing at all. But if people don't believe and trust in it, then it doesn't matter. So we need to do things to reinstill the trust. So let's start out with, you got to have, number one, voter ID. Okay. So what, 80, something like 86% of Americans support voter ID law, right? That is not a partisan issue. That is a nonpartisan or a bipartisan issue. So why is that not a thing? And the left likes to say, well, voter ID is racist. No, it's not. You're saying that because someone is of a ethnic diversity or background or different race, that they're incapable of getting an ID that's required for every other thing you do as an adult in life, driving, renting a hotel, an apartment, buying a car, opening a bank account, buying cigarettes, buying alcohol. But to vote, it's racist. Get out of here. And you know what? If you want to take that stance, fine. Let's just give everyone IDs. I'm okay with a small tax increase on me so that everyone can have an ID and we can put this one to rest.
But we don't need to have a tax increase. We don't need a tax increase to get voter ID. I mean, everybody has IDs already anyway. They just don't want you to show one.
Yes, exactly. So let's see. We need to have transparency when it comes to vote counting, and the ballot chain of custody. That's a very big thing. The chain of custody was broke multiple times in 2020, and if you look back to court precedences, and I can't cite cases specifically off the top of my head, I've read so many thousands of cases, probably very least hundreds of court cases. I've come across a couple where ballots were thrown out because chain of custody was broken. There's a requirement for chain of custody. Right. I also think there should be transparency in the counting. Like if you looked in Michigan, where you had there at the county center, they went up and held Bristol boards up on the glass so no one could see what was happening inside. Oh, do you think that instills trust in the people?
Not at all.
What's going on? No, we need transparency. We need to get rid of ballot harvesting. That is just such a corrupt practice.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah,
it is very, very creates a very vulnerable opportunity for voter fraud. And intimidation. We saw videos leaked back in 2016 out of California where people were going around, it's legal in California, ballot harvesting, going around and intimidating people into filling out the ballots how they wanted, caught on video. Let's see. Here's a big one. This is a big one. Cleaning up the voter rolls. Okay. So when someone dies, right, the coroner has to contact the Social Security Administration, let them know this person died, right? So that they know, so they're not, getting any more Social Security checks out or none ever go out, right? Why can't they also send a message over to the Secretary of State's office? That's who handles your voter rolls,
right,
and your elections in your states, so that they're removed also. Because everywhere in the nation, doesn't matter where you are, everywhere in the nation has people on the rolls that are dead, have people that no longer live there. When you transfer and you move somewhere and you register to vote there, then what should also happen is they are required to then contact your last state and have you removed from that voter roll. I personally know people who received ballots for people that lived where they were. I have a couple friends in California, and one of them received 2 ballots for the prior 2 people that lived in his apartment. So he got 3 ballots. He got his own and 2 others. I'll bet you those other people got ballots where they lived also.
Oh, let me tell you something. I'm big on election integrity, and I don't know that our election systems are under attack by the machines as much as they are about the registrations that people have that they're not using to vote for that they're not using to vote, and those are the registrations that are being stolen for ballot harvesting. And I can talk about that all day. It's a show in itself. But there's another thing you've got here that's near and dear to my heart, which is national debt. And I'm always talking about our national debt. It's $30 trillion, and it's growing. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the debt clock online, you'll find that after they add in the unfunded liabilities, it's going to be over $100 trillion in debt. If you're elected,
I think it's actually over $200 trillion when you look at the unfunded also.
So while you're telling me about what you would do to fight the unfunded liabilities, but even better yet, we've talked about that. What would you do?
So, all right, right off the bat, I would never, we need to have fiscal responsibility in Washington, D.C. These people are running Congress. I would argue that the budget, national debt, the budget is the main responsibility of Congress, okay? The power of the purse. But we haven't had a budget in, 30 years? We keep passing these omnibuses. Like, come on. We need to have a balanced budget period, a balanced budget amendment, and we need a balanced budget, and not just a balanced budget, but we need to have a surplus so we can start paying back this debt. Up until just very recent history, I have stuck hard by that our national debt is the greatest threat to our nation. It can collapse.
So wait, so real quick, I just pulled it up. Our U.S. unfunded liabilities are $168 trillion. So when you talk about national debt, what's that?
168.5. I pulled it up.
Yeah, so exactly. So you're seeing what we're talking about. So on the unfunded, the national debt is big on me. What is something you would do to help us get rid of our national debt? You kind of answered it, but I was talking over you, so I want to give you a chance to answer it again. National debt. What's our biggest problem?
That we have politicians that refuse to exercise the power of the purse and do a balanced budget, but not just a balanced budget, to have a surplus so that we can actually start paying back this debt. Okay. Also, I want to point out that right now, the U.S. government has racked up $506,000 in debt on you, on me, on my 2-year-old son. That is a debt liability for every U.S. citizen, $506,000. Okay.
$500,000 is my debt.
Yep. And mine.
Isn't that amazing?
And my friend who just had his baby 2 weeks ago. Yeah. His daughter's already $500,000 in debt.
Already $500,000 in debt. Here's
so
another.
I would like to, I have this proposal. So we've all heard of the penny plan, right? Well, for a long time I was a fan of, forget the penny plan, let's do nickel plan. Well, you can get too big of a jerk back and you can actually cause some real problems, right? So you got to be really responsible about how you do things. But I had an idea for this, and actually this isn't originally my idea. I just adapted it to the federal government. Let's give an incentive to all the bureaucrats, the agencies, the alphabet soups of our government, because right now the incentive is this. Here's your budget. And if you don't spend it all, you'll get less next time. So they have an incentive to waste money. So they get a bigger budget, or at very least.
Exactly. Good point, Brandon. Good point.
Let's give a personal benefit to every member of our government to cut. So here's what we do. And my friend Tom, he's running for Congress up in Michigan. He did this on the local level when he ran his county executive or something. So we say, every agency, here's what your budget is. And for every bit of spending you cut, we're going to give 1% back as a bonus to every, and the percentage might have to change depending on which department, but 1 to 3% back as a bonus to everyone in your department. Well, when you have a department with $50 million budget and there's 11 people, you can really, get some, you gave me incentive to spend the time to find where we're wasting money and not waste it. We would cut a lot out of federal spending right there alone. I guarantee it. I love we had to pay that bonus one time, because then that waste is gone.
So, Brandon, I want to point out something that I'm noticing with you, but I also noticed with other candidates, is that maybe you don't have the perfect idea, maybe you don't have the right idea, but at least it's on your radar. And that's what I like about candidates, is that not all of them have the perfect ideas, but they've got the topic on their radar, which means that they're going to be looking out for it if they get elected, right?
Absolutely. And I personally think no one has a perfect idea, and we can't let perfect be the enemy of good.
So you've talked about something else that's near my heart, which is term limits. Let's talk about term limits.
Ooh. I'm kind of an expert on this one. I've been praised for my write-ups here. So I'm very fair when it comes to term limits. I give the positives and the negatives. I can lay them all out. So but at the end of the day, if I lay out all the positives and I lay out all the negatives, no one who's looking at it, who doesn't have something to gain, would say anything other than we need term limits. Okay. We have to have term limits. If you enacted term limits and you put an end to corporate lobbying, you would end 95% of the corruption in our government. All right. We need to have, people coming in with fresh ideas. So let's just cover a couple quick things right now. You get these politicians in there for, the Nancy Pelosi's, who's running for her, 19th term, or is it, or she 20th now? 19th.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, so they've lost touch. They're corrupted. They're power hungry, and they don't want to give up their power. Well, let's set term limits And people say, well, then you'll lose the effectiveness. Actually, an interview down there at CPAC I did, this came up, and I was talking about that's a false premise, because they'll say, like, well, then, you know, you won't be able to get the committee assignments if you're only there for, let's say, House of Reps, 8 years. Well, yeah, you will, because people will term out that are on those committees.
Yeah,
They'll get it.
everybody else will be having term limits, so only, you know.
Well, then you're also cutting the good people, like the Jim Jordans or the whoever you fill in the name. You're cutting them too, you know. So you're cutting our own. Well, yeah, and you're also, so you're going to lose one good politician for every 20 bad ones. I'll take that trade. You bring in, and this is something you brought up earlier about different ideas, fresh ideas. Well, when you have new people coming in, cycling in, and old people cycling out, you know, old as in time in service, you also bring in new ideas, new ways to approach the problems. Also, when you come in and you're limited on time, you're not as much worried about your career and how can you get yourself to that next level. It's, man, I only have so much time. I better hit the ground running, and you will hit the ground running.
And
you will not waste time. You'll be way more.
You're going to spend more time fixing things than you are worrying about your career, because guess what? You know, while they might be term limited in Congress, they go to the Senate. So if they do a really good job in Congress, they go to the Senate, or maybe they just come back home and be governor or a state rep or whatever. Gun-free zones, I already know how you pretty much feel about it. Let's keep that one short, because you say you're a Second Amendment guy. So let's talk about the gun-free zones.
They create shooting galleries. We protect everything in society with guns, with banks, politicians, athletes, musicians, jewelry stores. Everything is protected with guns. And I'm going to go to the main gun-free zone, but we don't protect our kids with guns. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? All right. Look at Kennesaw, Georgia, all right, where they required everyone to own guns if you were, you know, eligible. And not
very right.
And the violent crime rate dropped. If you look at the concentration of guns throughout the world, the areas with the higher concentrations have the lowest violent crime rates. The areas with the lowest concentrations have the highest violent crime rates. So get rid of gun-free zones.
Love it. Our border wall.
Build the wall, baby. Big and tall.
Legal immigration, I guess you're all so I'm going to ask you something about legal immigration. You know, I've always said that, you know, our immigration system is broken, and neither Republicans nor Democrats want to fix it, simply because it favors them both, I guess you could say. You know, the Republicans use it as a narrative, the Democrats use it for, you know, to try to get votes. But our immigration system is broken. It needs to be reformed. Neither party wants to do it. What will you do to help us with promoting legal immigration or immigration reform?
Elitists and politicians don't like my stand, but the average American I've talked to love it. First, right off the bat, I want to put a moratorium on immigration, period. Whether it be a 5-year moratorium or so on, while we figure out these issues and change the process. But our immigration system is broken. But we're also the most generous nation in the world. And if I recall correctly, according to the UN, 50% of the world's immigrants every year are to the United States. So half of the immigration in the world is to us. We're the most generous nation in the world. I think we let too many people in. I think that we should cut back from the 2 million mark to, you know, maybe 500,000. It shouldn't be easy to get. Nothing in life is worth having is easy. But it also shouldn't take 20 years, you know. At the same time, you had to balance, because you can't just let everyone in. There was a great philosopher who he had a great analogy, which we're not going to talk about right now because it's really simple, but it takes a few minutes to explain. But basically, if you just let everyone in because their country sucks and so on, what ends up happening is you hit a point where you can't handle what's there and you collapse. You can only help so many people, right? So call me heartless or whatever, which I'm not, but I think we should limit immigration. I think we let too many people in. At very least, we need to figure out where our issues are, fix them. You know, and in my opinion, we should have a moratorium on it in the meantime. Absolutely zero illegal immigration. We need to get that locked down, secure our borders. A nation that doesn't know and can't control who's coming into its country is not a nation at all. You know, that immigration, I actually think that the immigration thing is not as complex as people make it out to be. And I've read the entire U.S. codes and all the laws on it. And I think that we go back to a merit-based system. You don't just get to come because you want to and you waited or paid. You got to bring something to the table, you know, bring a skill. Bring it straight.
Brandon, the more I talk to you, the more I realize you're kind of a nerd when it comes to information.
People look at me, and I mean, not being, I don't look like I am a nerd, but man, I really kind of am. I love these documents behind me. I've not only read them each more than I can count, but I've read a lot of the writings of our founders, writing about their personal beliefs on when they were structuring and how they came to these conclusions. So
Right.
I really am kind of a nerd, and I love law. So I've read a lot of law. I've read a ton of U.S. code, and I am kind of a nerd, and I'll wear it with a badge of honor.
I love it. Like I said, I'm kind of noticing every time we talk about a topic, you're talking about some kind of information you've read, something you've brought into your circle to give you more knowledge to be able to have not only a good opinion but have an answer or a solution for it. What about Social Security?
So another complex issue, but not as complex as people think it is. So there's this common thing where people say that politicians need to stop robbing Social Security and pay the money back. Well, that's actually a half truth. They actually didn't rob it. What they did was they basically said is, here's the money in Social Security right here. And we want this money because we want to spend it on this or that. So what they do is they'll write a worthless piece of paper.
An IOU.
And it's a bond. And they'll sell the bond to the Social Security Trust. Now here's a worthless piece of paper. Now they have the $1 trillion they want to spend on whatever it is. So they didn't actually rob it. They just replaced it with a worthless piece of paper. So it doesn't pay the kind of interest it would be drawing if it was otherwise. So what we need to do is we need to start setting a requirement, and you can't do it all at once. You'll collapse things. So what you need to do is you need to set a requirement to where there is X amount paid back to the Social Security Trust, buying those bonds back every single year, right? Until we can get a nice amount of safety net in there. And the reason being is one of the greatest threats we do have to this nation, we talked about, was our fiscal responsibility, our budget, our national debt. What happens when you default on your debt? Countries don't lend you money anymore. Well, right now, when Social Security checks go out every month, you know where that money comes from? Because it does come from the trust, because there's a bunch of worthless piece of papers in the trust. You can't pay grandma with that. So what do? They borrow the money and then pay Social Security. All right. So, and that's a simplified version of how it actually happens. But that is what happens. So what happens if we default on a loan, on a big loan, and nowhere's one to lend us money? Well, what's the first thing we see right off the bat? Well, now at the end of the month, our grandmas, our grandparents, our siblings who are of the age, our parents, they're not getting a Social Security check. You want to talk about a fast collapse, a fast uprising? That right there is. All of a sudden, all the seniors, 18%.
How about we just give the and this is of course the whole topic for another day, but let the people invest their own money, but the problem is government wants to have control over it because they know that many people won't invest it. Many people will simply spend it and not save it for retirement. But the problem is the government's now spending our money, and like you said, giving us a worthless IOU. But the reality is, I guess, on the upside is that at least we know that they're going to give us the money back in the form of retirement. But they're going to borrow it, of course, from and using printed money. I'm being a little convoluted, but I'm making the point that government is even more inefficient. So is the proper response to say, okay, the government is going to be able to just pay our retirement, pay us our retirement every month based on these banknotes or these IOUs, or is the right way to do it to start over and say, okay, we're going to give the money back to the people, let them take their chances with the money, and not have this money going through the government and not having to print more money to pay it. I know I'm speaking in circles, if you will, but the reality is it's not an efficient system, and that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and actually, so to be clear, I actually want to get rid of Social Security, but you can't just get rid of it because then all these people don't get their money. So I don't.
You phase it out. Phase it out.
Yeah, I don't recall if this is on my website, but I post about it on my Facebook. I actually have a plan for an opt-out system. Now, it's not fully done. We're still crunching numbers and analytics. My guy Arthur, he's a numbers genius, a finance expert, a couple degrees, MBA in finance, and all that. He's my campaign manager, and we worked on this. So we're coming up with a way to opt out based on your age, what it takes for you to opt out. Now you'll lose your benefit if you opt out, but then you don't have to pay it anymore. And there there should be a partial requirement that you have to put this money into the market, at
Right.
least, to save. Otherwise, no, you get a lot more people that are getting to the age where they can't take care of themselves anymore, and there's no money there. Now you get an even bigger tax burden. So you got to
I like that point that you just made, which is, hey, you can keep your money, but if you're not investing it or a portion of it, then you're going to lose it, or it goes back to the government. Good.
Yeah, you have to have that in the opt-out plan, or what'll happen is in 30 years, you'll end up with a bunch of people who are now not able to take care of themselves, and there's no money in Social Security, there's no money in their retirement, and now they're dying on the street. So what's going to happen? You end up with an even bigger tax burden. That's why you have to have that requirement that they have to take the money and put it in the market themselves. Well, I would much rather have my money in the private market than Social Security, where I'm getting 2% a year. Get out of here. Then one other thing about Social Security is, we need to stop tax. It's complicated how they do it, but we need to stop taxing it as income, because the people who are dependent on it, who are getting it, taxing it as income. There's a threshold where you're paying taxes on your Social Security. I think that there should be a set level that if you're below this in your retirement, then you pay no taxes, not only on your Social Security, but on your withdrawing from your 401k. Because like when you withdraw from your 401k, that's still taxable income depending on where you're at and income amount withdrawing and where you are in age and so on. So, this is taking advantage of the weak, the weakest members of society, the most susceptible members, the members that most don't have the ability to go get another job because they're not physically capable, or, so on. So, people need to be a stronger voice for our seniors.
All right, Brandon, I'm starting I'm kind of tapering now. All right, I got a few more questions before we wrap up a little bit. Rural development. Rural development.
Did you say world development?
Rural development.
Oh, rural development. Okay. So there's a few things here. One is, it may sound stupid when people say it's a luxury, but broadband, it's really big issue. And I can't think of the numbers off the top of my head, but a really high percentage of rural areas have no broadband, which is really important these days, not only for education, where the schools, we have students in these schools in some of these rural communities, they don't have the access to the information, as the same information or the level of information that we do, because their internet sucks. And I know that sounds stupid, but in this day of age, it really is a necessity. So I've come up with a plan, a way to be able to get the broadband to all of America, to the rural environments. It'll take a while, but without creating a tax burden for the citizens. And that's a big thing, a big one right there. There's things we need to do, but we shouldn't have to be paying taxes on them. So how can the government utilize its role to make these things happen without costing us expense? So just a quick example here. Okay, we tell AT&T and all these other carriers, okay, so here's what we want to do. We want broadband in all these rural communities. A lot of you won't take it out there because the cost you incur. So it's an investment. Let's look at the ROI here. So you're going to spend $10 million to run broadband out to this community with, 1,000 people. Well, no, it's going to take you, 10 years just to break even. So here's what we'll do. You pay no taxes on any income you make from this until you've hit the point of break even. And then you get another free 2 years. And this isn't the exact plan, but this is the gist of it. Another 2 years of tax-free. And so you took care of something that America needs, so you get to benefit from it. So it is a return on investment play. And businesses, especially these big corporations, they think, a lot of them do think big picture. They don't think about the return right now. They think of, where am I at in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? So that right there would be able, that plan, and there's a little more to it, would be able to get broadband around the nation to all these rural communities that don't have it. Another one is, I actually think that farming and food production should actually be classified as a critical infrastructure and fall under national security interest. So
you're getting on something that I was getting ready to ask you about on national security, which is that a lot of our rural land is being sold to foreign countries, and I think that part of that is because of our economy. Part of it is that we're losing farming as a way of life. There's lots of reasons for that. Some of it is because of bad policies that are not helping our farmers in our throughout our country. But I would like to know what you're going to do, what you would do about about our rural land, our farms being sold to foreign countries. right now, and not only are they buying up our land, but they're farming on it, and they're shipping the agriculture overseas. Americans aren't even getting it. What's on your radar about that?
So one other quick thing first, a reason why I want farming and food production to be a national security issue and considered critical infrastructure. Look at the supply chain issues we've had. All right, if China, the amount of food we buy from China, if they just shut off sending food over here, we very likely would see famine. So we need to bring it back. Now let's jump to yours because it comes into play. So first right off the bat, I want to confiscate I want the government to confiscate all the land that is owned by foreign governments. Now, it's illegal for a foreign government to own American land, but you can very easily, specifically China, you can actually track where the government owns all these various industries, and those industries buy land in America. So there's a lot of land owned in America that a Chinese entity or corporation
that owns an American company, American LLC, if you will.
But China, the government of China actually owns that entity, and it's this sleight of hand BS. Well, China doesn't actually own it. No, they own the corporation that owns it. So that's a violation of that U.S. code. So if any land, any of these farms that can unquestionably track back to being owned by a government, we need to enforce the U.S. code and take it. All right. I don't like these foreign companies coming in and buying our land and our farms and so on. It's a tough argument to say the government would have a right to confiscate or force the sale. You could actually make the argument that they can force a sale, taking clause.
Right.
So, it's hard to come up and make an argument they can take it, but you absolutely can if it's trackable back to the government. And a lot of these Chinese corporations that are in this nation that own a bunch of farmland, can easily be tracked right back to the Chinese government. The CCP owns these industries, and they're just basically little branches of the government. It's kind of like having the FBI and calling it not part of the U.S. government. It really is kind of like that.
I know.
So we have to fix these problems.
The drug epidemic.
Did you say the drug epidemic?
The drug epidemic.
And so that's a really complex one. Still working on my plan there and doing my research, but it's so there. We've not addressed this properly. So if you look at actually Portugal, where they had a really bad heroin and opiate epidemic crisis, they came up with a few policies that have brought their numbers dramatically down. So one, right off the bat, we need to make Narcan much more widely available. Then I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's on my website. If you click on it, there's actually a drug. It's not a drug. It doesn't get you high, but so when someone is ODing, or I'm not sorry, it's not ODing. Sorry, when they're having withdrawals, which heroin withdrawals can actually kill you. This will actually meet the physical requirement that your body gets from heroin without getting you high. So in Portugal, they actually have these vans that are designated to go to these specific areas at these specific times. And addicts who are quitting or having withdrawals can go over and they get it. It will not get them high. It can't hurt them. But what it does do is it makes it easier for them to get off the drugs. That is one little piece. Okay. Second, we need to start looking at the real problems here. The drug epidemic, it really hits everyone. I lost two of my lifelong best friends. My very first friend in that I ever made, a lifelong friend. I lost him 4 years ago. He got into drugs when we were in our early 20s, and I just wasn't going to be around that stuff. And he got cleaned up, straightened his life out, and then he just hit some really hard times and ran into the wrong person and gave him some drugs. He went home and OD'd and died. Every one of us knows someone that's similar story. So we need to look at more of the root causes here. We need to take stronger efforts in preventing these drug manufacturing and trafficking. 90 some odd % of fentanyl and heroin cross our southern border. So let's secure our southern border. Not bad. Next, let's change the codes and punishments for this. Now I'd have to refresh myself on it, but it's something like you get more punishment for trafficking drugs than manufacturing them. I want to set higher minimums. Instead of it being potentially 1 year to 3 years for manufacture and a minimum of 5 years for trafficking. And those might not be exactly right. I think I do have
Yeah.
them on my website. Let's make it much more extreme.
I love it.
First, that's backwards. The manufacturer should have a much higher punishment if one of them's going to be higher. But I say let's make it 10-year minimums right at the bat. What are you going to do? Well, the guy who says, well, I can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing this, trafficking it or manufacturing it, and if I get caught, I'm 1 to 3 years in jail. Maybe I get out after a year and a half and a little bit of probation, but I'll make all this money and I'll have stored away, buried in the backyard or whatever. That's worth the risk. Let's make it no longer worth the risk. Let's say the punishment is so damn harsh that you look at it and say, hey, there ain't no way. So I want to set mandatory minimums of about 10 years for first offenses.
Right.
Let's have it really worse.
Two more questions and we'll wrap it up here, Brandon. Faith, family, and fiscal responsibility sounds like that's something you believe in.
Absolutely.
And then I always ask people the final question, which is, it's a two-part question, is what makes America the greatest country and what unites us as Americans?
What makes America the greatest country in this world and all of history is the opportunity this nation grants its citizens. No country in the world offers the kind of opportunity and freedom this nation does. This nation has the most upward class mobility of any nation in the world through all of history. All right, the ability to move from being poor to middle class or rich is astronomically higher in this nation. You just have to have the drive to do it. The quality. The equality is not equal outcome. It's equal opportunity. If you're willing to put it forth and try, then most likely you will succeed. I grew up poor. I have built a much better life for my children. My sister, same. My brother, same. And this is the only nation in the world where you do not have the generational poverty because of this opportunity. So there's a lot of things that make us a great nation. If I had to choose one, I would say that right there is what makes us the greatest nation.
Brandon, well, no, you answered it. What makes us the greatest country? What unites us as Americans? And I've said it's kind of a two-part question, but it's kind of the same answer, But I want to thank you very much for being on the show tonight. I really do.
William, it was a pleasure to meet you down at CPAC. It really was
well. There's me another
getting this coin right here.
Yeah, you like my coin there, huh? I love it.
So I'm going to keep this through.
Yeah, please do. Well, look, I'll bring you back on the show down the road. I'm gonna keep you on, keep you on the radar. I'd love to see you, do well in this next election. And are you running against an incumbent or are you running against an establishment person?
I'm running against an incumbent.
How many years?
He's running for his 8th term.
Democrat?
Republican.
Okay, there you go. Well,
he's actually a Republican that I told you about that said he was going to help my brother, the champion of our military and veterans, who said he was going to help my brother and then blew us off. Blew off a war hero when he needed legitimate help, and constituent service is a very important aspect of being a rep. So, but you have my personal cell phone number. Don't hesitate to use it. And I want one thing from you.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm in the broadcast here. I'll talk to you offline for a second.
No, this has to be on air.
Oh, do it.
What I want from you is I want you to join me in these 3 glorious words. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. I love it. Let's go, Brandon. All right, I'm in the broadcast, and then I'll talk to you offline for just a second. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and as always, you can find this podcast or this interview not only on my Facebook page where you're watching it now, but on Rumble, on YouTube, and then the podcast will be on all podcast apps where you can share it, listen, and please do share it. Thank y'all so much and have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Good night.